Hey.
Hey, I can see you. Good old technology.
Why does that sometimes?
Adjust some things here. Let's see. How are you this morning? How's it going?
It is going well. It's looking pretty nasty out there.
Yeah, it is looking pretty nasty. I'm going. Are you going anywhere?
Nope. I have the next trip I have planned is end of March. So hopefully most of the people in our family have had a COVID shot by then, besides our kids. And
Yeah, right. I'm in that unicorn world where I've had COVID.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got it. Got it, had it, got my wife sick, got my kids sick. I didn't die, praise God. There was a couple of days where I was like, I'm not circling the drain, but I felt like I was like circling the circling drain.
Yeah.
It was like, tell my wife, I'm like, babe, if this keeps kind of on this progression, I might have to go to the hospital. She's like, all right, just relax, okay? But yeah, I don't want to have that again. I'm ready for a vaccine for sure.
How did your kids deal with it? Was it pretty mild for them, or were they pretty sick as well?
Abby was completely asymptomatic. No, nothing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Caleb had. Yeah, it was great. I think Caleb felt kind of icky, I guess is the best word to use, for a couple days. And dude, that was it. That was them. I was completely wiped out feeling for about 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I didn't lose my sense of smell or my sense of taste.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I didn't. But which is interesting because that's what a lot of people experience. They're like, I don't have any other symptoms except I lost my smell and taste. And I'm like, well, I had all the other symptoms and I didn't have that.
They'll call that the Ryan Henry strain of coronavirus.
Bro, I had all of them. I had all of those suckers. Yeah. We'll have to do some editing because I'm already recording it. Am I already recording us? I'm already recording us. All right, that's fine. It's not a problem. So just before we jump in, I kind of do like a formal introduction. This is just an interview between me and you. That's all it is. We're just talking. And so I'm just going to ask you questions and let you tee it up. And then, from some things probably you'll say, I might go like, well, what do you mean by that? Tell us more about that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like your journey into entrepreneurship, what you've been learning. I'll ask you some questions like, this is some spotlight stuff. So I will be promoting you. I just want to make sure you are aware of that. Like, I'll be like, well, tell us about yourself. I'll be like, well, hold on. Tell us about your company. Like, how do you describe people at your company, right? Like core values. And if it sounds good, which your core values are pretty good, I'll talk about that in that regard.
Cool.
So that's all we're doing. We'll still end at 10, and if you're ready to go, we'll roll.
I'm good.
All right, cool. All right, well, hey everybody, how's it going? Ryan Henry here, certified EOS implementer with Grip Business Traction. Today I have on the Catchin Vision series, Josh Willard with Josh's Frogs in my hometown of Owosso, Michigan. And Josh, great to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, so just kind of kick us off, because I know when I was introduced to you by a fellow friend, Justin Horvath, at the Shiawassee Economic Development Partnership, he said, hey, I want you to meet this guy named Josh with Josh's Frogs. And my mind was more like, not what you are, right? So like, What is Josh's Frogs?
Well, whenever I tell the business name to somebody, they're always like, "Oh, well, tell us what you guys do." And I say, it really is that simple. It's Josh's Frogs. We do frogs. So we're an online pet store located here in Owosso, Michigan. We do breed a lot of frogs here on site for the pet trade, but we also do some lizards, and then we do plants and insects and all the stuff you need to take care of, that kind of stuff. So our mission is to connect people with nature. And so whether that means a house plant in your house, a little lizard, or maybe a fish tank, we try to satisfy that need for people to get them off their cell phones and out of those urban jungles and bring a little bit of nature inside their house. So that's our mission. That's what we do.
Yeah, that's really good. I don't think that was my question though, or my curiosity about you. I thought the name seemed self-explanatory. I thought, what's the scale? And my perception was different than what it is. My perception was, well, candidly, apologetically, significantly smaller than what you guys are like. So maybe just kind of pin us, like, what does Josh's Frogs look like right now? Like your size, what are you doing? Where are you selling? All that kind of stuff. And then we'll just kind of back up and you can kind of fill us in on the blanks of how the heck all that happened, like your story.
Yep. We've grown a lot since the beginning. So currently right now, we just finished 2020 and we did about just over 15 million for the year. We have a staff of almost 110 people. We have a greenhouse, but then also our facility here in Owosso, and we're currently looking for more space. So our industry is a lot bigger than what most people think. So right now, the exotic pet industry is about a $3 billion a year industry. So we just have a small section of that and hope to grow into a larger section of that industry. So most people are surprised that our industry is that big and that we're that big. But it's a pretty big market.
Yeah, well, when you and I met, you kind of blew me over when you said essentially that, and I just kind of stood back and was like, okay, I'm writing it down. And I went, okay, I just got to clear the air here. I had no idea. I had no idea. I thought it was like this little shop maybe or something. I was like, so perceptively a lot different than maybe what a lot think. So, like, what's your story? Like, how did all this happen? And maybe like even before this happened, like, what's your story? Like, how do you explain that? I'm so curious.
Yeah, I like to say that I started Josh's Frogs by accident, and it is totally true. So I grew up by a swamp. My mom was always kicking us out of the house to say, hey, no more video games, guys, go play outside. And we had a big swamp by our house. And so we were always trudging through that thing and catching snakes and turtles and frogs and that kind of stuff. And my mom's rule was always you could keep it for one night, and then you had to return it the next morning back to the swamp. And so really developed a love for animals and taking care of animals through that. And in high school, I got connected with a local pet store and thought it was so cool that you could get animals that were not just native to Michigan, but you could get them from all over the world. And so I kept a few snakes and whatnot. And then it transitioned to getting rid of all of the animals when I went off to college. So I got rid of everything. And once I got out of college, I said, man, I'd really like to get back into snakes again. And the wife was like, no, there are no snakes coming in our house. And so we had zero money. And so I started researching, like, what are some other animals that my wife might let me keep, and kind of landed on frogs. But it was just cost prohibitive for us. I was a youth pastor at the time. My wife was a substitute teacher. There's no way we could afford anything extra in our budget. And so I hatched this plan to buy some stuff in bulk, sell off the extra, and so I could keep my tank of frogs. And it just kind of grew from there. It was a hobby of mine where I would bring in some extra stuff, sell off the extra, and I'd be able to grow my collection of animals. So that's how that all started for us.
Wow. So did you go to school to be a youth pastor? Is that what you went to school for after high school?
So I went to Huntington College in Huntington, Indiana. I started pre-med and, just really thought like, hey, I get decent grades. I really want to help people. And so, hey, maybe I could get my, become a doctor and then maybe transition to the mission field for that. then I got involved in an organization called Youth for Christ. The whole point is that, like, right there in that area of Indiana, a lot of tiny churches that don't have really any resources to develop some kind of program for teenagers. So the Youth for Christ steps in and does something at the school for those kids, and got involved in that. I just really fell in love with it, and kind of found my passion or my niche for helping people in that regard. And so I changed my major to youth ministry and finished school there, and came up and started working at a church here in Fowlerville, Michigan.
It's so funny. I always think this is great doing these interviews because we've been through a lot already in our journey together in EOS. And I do these and I always find out little nuanced little things about people. And I'm always like, oh. So my wife was in Youth for Christ at Central Free Methodist Church in Lansing.
Oh, really?
They traveled. Oh yeah, and they traveled all over the state of Michigan. And she just knows all people all over the place. We'll be in places and they'll be like, Are you Kelly Isham? She's like, well, it's Kelly Henry now. And I'm like, how do you know that person? And, so yeah, I didn't know that. That's really
small world.
Yeah, it is. So just once that happens, you just lay down the pre-med thing. You're just like, I'm not going to do that.
Yep. Right in the freshman year, just
wow.
Like I was trying to make sense of, like, hey, as an 18-year-old saying, okay, what am I really good at? I'm really good at school. I really love science. And I have this really big passion to help people. So, like, how do I mix that all together? Sounds like being a doctor on the mission field is the way to do that. As crazy as that just sounds, that this is a 5-minute conversation inside my head and deciding my entire future. Get going. And just really fell in love with helping kids. Just loved it. And it was probably the first time that I was doing something and felt like, oh my gosh, I'm really good at this. I really love this. I could be happy doing this the rest of my life, and took the plunge and changed my major and told everybody, I'm not being a doctor anymore. I'm being a youth pastor.
They do not pay the same for those.
No. Not at all.
Yeah, so I'm just like, okay, growing up, your mom's kicking you out of the house. You're like finding lizards and snakes, and you work at this pet store, and you realize the world can kind of show up as far as that. You go to be pre-med, you change with Youth for Christ into a youth pastor, and then you want snakes, and your wife is like, no, it's not going to happen. And so you buy a bunch of frogs with the idea of selling them so that then you can pay for the ones you want to keep.
Yeah, it was actually even simpler than buying frogs and selling out the extra. I bought a bunch of cups that you use to feed the frogs, and I sold those. So I had a pallet of those delivered to our apartment complex, carried all the boxes up our stairs, and lined our bedroom with these boxes. And then I went online and I just begged people to buy them so that I could afford to buy a tank and put some frogs in it. So my wife put up with walls of these cups around our apartment bedroom so that I could earn enough money to put a tank of frogs in our living room.
Yeah, I just want to put a pin in a couple of these things and just to speak to your journey to that point where you're buying cups and selling them online, and that's the genesis of what is now a $15 million 110 person company. And we'll talk about what you want to do in the future, which is it's a little bigger than selling some cups online in your apartment. A couple of things I just want to say. Anybody listening to this that's like, I think I'm an entrepreneur, but I don't know. Most of our journeys sound like that. Where in our early days, we're just looking, we're hunting, we're exploring for stuff. So if you kind of feel like that and you're just hunting, you're just looking for ideas to pursue, and you're looking for different stuff, and you're curious, and you're thinking, am I ready? Do I have the schooling? All that kind of stuff. I just want to say to you, welcome to the club. And Josh, can you speak to that? Like, where was the discovery of entrepreneurship, and was there even an awareness of entrepreneurship for you during this time?
Yeah, at that time, like it was just a means to an end. So I was not thinking like, hey, you know, I want to develop something larger, or hey, I really think that I'm an entrepreneur. It was just solving the problem that was immediately in front of me. Like, hey, I want to take a frog. We don't have enough money to afford that. I've got to do something else, and just kind of stumbled upon that. And like, I really feel like one of the keys to being an entrepreneur is solving problems and being creative and being not risk averse to say like, okay, I'm going to spend money we don't have to bring in all of these cups. And what that means is that we're not buying groceries if I can't sell these cups. Like I used our family budget to buy these cups.
Oh, wow.
Back up against the wall and said, hey, I have to solve this problem. And just by some hard work, but I would be the first to admit that it was by luck that I was able to be able to get rid of that stuff. And so like it really started with some problem solving and putting my back up against the wall, and kind of stumbled into being an entrepreneur. Was not something that I thought like, hey, this will be something I do long term. It was just a means to an end to solve this one problem that was immediately in front of me.
Wow. That's so, I could just tell you that there's so many stories out there. So any of you thinking like, I don't know, is my story weird? If your story sounds like that, that's actually pretty normal. That's actually pretty normal. So that's, everyone's unique, but it's usually a discovery process for sure. Okay, so keep us going. Did you sell the cups? I assumed that was the case, but like, how does the story keep going? Like,
so the cup sold amazingly well. It was just shocking how fast it went. And once that happened, my mind immediately shifted to like, I think I can do this again. Like, I think I can talk my wife into another tank of frogs, and I think I can do a couple other things besides the cups, and I think I can have another couple of tanks. And so it just grew from that. Like, hey, I'll solve this problem, and then it became solving some of my problems that I had with the hobby. So like with those poison dart frogs, you're making fruit fly cultures, and they literally smell like raw sewage. It's disgusting. And my wife's complaining like, hey, you've got these 3 tanks of frogs. The food that you're feeding them smells horrible. I don't know if I want you to keep doing this inside of our small apartment. And so I began experimenting. So I'm setting up these experiments, trying to make the stuff not smell horrible, just so that my wife doesn't finally come home and be like, get rid of all this stuff. I don't want it in our house anymore. So I did a bunch of experiments and kind of stumbled on some fruit fly media that doesn't smell. And so once I had that, I said, hey, I bet there are other people that have the same issue. And I started mixing up bags of this fruit fly media in my kitchen sink, zip tying them shut, and selling them all over the country with just the idea that like, hey, you know, this hobby was really good to me. I want to invest in this hobby and help some other people who might be in the same situation that I'm in, where their wife is like, this stuff smells, get it out of my house. And so I started selling that along with cups and lids out of our apartment while I'm still a youth pastor. Still at that point, no idea that I wanted to do anything different. Just like, this is really cool. I can be a youth pastor and I can have as many frogs as I want because I can sell this extra stuff to keep as many frogs as I want. And so I did that for 3 years, totally like every week it's a thing that I'm doing. It's a side hustle, as people would call it, but still no clue that I was ever going to turn this into a business. It was just a hobby, something I'm doing on the side that continues to grow, but like there's no idea in my mind that, oh yeah, this is going to turn into a business in the future. Just no idea. Just something I'm doing on the side because I like doing it and I want to keep these frogs in our apartment.
It's so good. So when does the moment, like I love what Gino Wickman talks about in Entrepreneurial Leap, where there's this moment where you're like, oh, I think I'm an entrepreneur. I think I have an entrepreneurial pursuit to go after. I got this idea for it. So I'm curious, what was that like? Take us there. You're with your wife, you're doing this. When does this become like I think I can make this a business?
Yep.
And what does that look like to make that kind of transition?
So as I'm a youth pastor, part of that journey involves continuing education and getting a master's degree. And so I take a look at what I'm doing. It's a very large youth ministry. So I'm to the point, there's 100 students in our youth group. I'm doing less and less interaction with the actual students. I'm doing more work with the volunteers that are doing the work. And as a young 20-something who has an itch to really help people, that's hard for me to wrap my mind around. Like, I'm helping volunteers who are helping people. And so I began to get a little bit restless and saying, hey, what I really want to do is really help people in a more smaller group, one-on-one setting. And so I decided to get my master's in pastoral counseling and say, hey, maybe there's some shifts happening here in the future. Still, the frog thing just seems like this hobby. And throughout that process, really fall in love with counseling and say, hey, I don't want to just do this from a pastoral standpoint. I think I really want to do counseling itself. And so I end up moving out of a pastoral counseling program to a master's in counseling so that I can become a licensed counselor. And so I'm youth pastor by day. One night a week, I'm going to my master's program. And then in the other evenings, I'm doing this frog stuff so that I can continue this hobby. Because now I'm paying for school on a youth pastor's salary. And so throughout that process, at the very end, you have to do an internship. And when I'm signed up to do this youth detention home right outside of Lansing, everything looks great. I'm really excited about this new challenge and really excited about finishing my program. Not sure what's going to happen after I finish that program. So comes time for that internship. I resigned from the church, and less than a week before I'm supposed to start my internship, the detention home calls me up and says, Josh, I can't go into the details, but we lost our funding. We're shutting down. We're closing the doors. So we can't take you. So I don't know what happened, but they were went out of business in less than a week. So I call the college that I'm attending and say, hey guys, you guys need to help me find another internship to start in a week. This one just fell through. And their jaws drop and they're like, we can't do that. We can't get you in a place that quickly. You're gonna have to wait till next year. I said, next year? Wow. I resigned from my job a couple of weeks ago. I don't have a job. My wife and I were gonna pinch our pennies to make it through this internship. And then I'm hoping that at the end of this internship, I can find a job. I don't know what to do. I'm a youth pastor by trade. I can't go out and get another job. What am I going to do?
Oh my God.
And they say, there's nothing we can do. You need to wait a year. And so that's when, just sitting with my wife and I, looking at our budget and okay, it's not going to work. And I hatched this plan in my mind, okay, let me try this frog thing. Maybe I can turn this frog thing into something that makes money. And I say, the worst case scenario, I can do this frog thing all day, and I can go get a job during the night and work somewhere to supplement that income. And I can run 2 jobs where I do the frog stuff and work a little at night. And my wife, bless her heart, was like, sure, let's do it. Let's go for it. And so I stopped doing this a few hours a night type stuff and really invested a lot of time in the business. And it just really grew that year a ton. It grew a lot and it changed my mind. So it was less of hey, I'm just doing this hobby, trying to get a few tanks to, okay, I need to turn this into a real business at this point. And so I was kind of pushed off that ledge, I guess you could say, and had to, again, like we talked about at the very beginning, just solving a problem. At that point, that's what it was. I have to make this thing work because I need to solve this problem. I have this year that I got to figure out something to do. And so did that for a year, found a really great.
What year is this? This is 2021 now. What year is that happening? Just put a timestamp in everybody's minds.
2007.
Okay, so it's 2007. This is right before the Great Recession. Interesting.
Yep.
So it's pretty scary time for you.
Oh yeah.
You go to, I didn't even know that either. I didn't know that you had a counseling background. You and I have very similar histories and stuff. This is interesting. I thought I wanted to be a counselor for a while. There's a bunch of books up there for people who come over to my house and like, what do you got like biblical counseling books for and like different stuff? I'm like, there's a story behind it. Before we go there though, I'm curious just to put we always say this in the US is the only thing we can do with our past is learn from it.
Yeah.
And as you start this entrepreneurial path, just literally to solve a financial problem because youth pastoring, what you gave up on that to do the counseling, and the counseling fell through. So like these two paths aren't there, and you want to pursue this one just to make money.
Yep.
So interesting. Were you thinking like, well, maybe I'll go back into counseling after this year?
Yeah, during that whole year, I mean, it was really I was solving a problem for that year specifically. So ended up getting the internship and did the internship while doing the frog thing. So I was doing the frogs full time for a year, then went to the counseling thing. That was 7 months of craziness. So it's all about getting your hours in counseling, and the issues with getting hours in counseling is that they're all over the place in a day. You can't block chunk them. So I'm at the facility from 8 in the morning till 8 at night to get my 4 to 6 hours worth of counseling hours done. And then I'm heading home, saying hi to the wife, and then I'm toiling. At this point, the business is in my basement. I'm toiling until anywhere from 9 to 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm getting up at 5 a.m. to finish getting some packages out that morning so I can get to my internship by 8 o'clock in the morning. So it was 7 months of a blur. And even during that time, what I'm thinking is, hey, this frog stuff is providing a little bit extra income combined with my wife, who now is not substitute teaching. She's an actual teacher. We're putting that together, so we're surviving. And at the end of this internship, I think I can find a job in counseling and move forward with that. And so that continues. Have a baby in February, and the internship is ending in May. And my wife and I start talking about what that future looks like. And I'm looking at my schedule and saying like, okay, counseling right now is an 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. job. There are appointments that we can schedule during the day, but like for most people, like they're working 9 to 5, they want appointments in the evening. And so I'm starting a family and realizing like, one of the values that my family had growing up was that my dad was always active in our lives and was at our sporting events, and we ate dinner together at the table. And I'm looking at a future that's not true, and trying to wrap my mind around like, okay, if I'm getting home at 8:30 every night, what does that look like as I have a family? And the back of my mind is this frog thing is really taking off and it's being successful. And if I ever want to go back to it and really try it, do I want to do that when I have 2 or 3 kids and I'm much older and I have this counseling job that is a well-paying job? Like, will I ever go back to it? And so I come to my wife as the internship is ending. The director there at Catholic Social Services is like, Josh, your clients show up, they pay, like, let's put you on staff. As soon as you're done with this internship, you can start. And I say to my wife, like, if I'm going to do this frog thing, like as a business and turn it into something, like this is my chance. If I don't do it now, I'll never do it. I say, can I do it for a year? And she says, sure, let's try it. She's crazy.
What's your wife's name? What's her name?
Julie.
Call out to Julie, the wife of the year.
Yeah.
That's so good. That's so good.
So she says, yeah, sure, let's try it. I spent the 7 months where I'm, doing Josh's Frogs from like 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Start fresh the first day, just banging it out, and the business just explodes. I'm curious though, like, just before you go into the explosion of Josh's Frogs, I love that you said to her, can I get a year? Can I just get a year? You got it's the recession
pretty much at this point in Michigan.
It's just starting. It's just starting. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what did the folks did you tell this to the folks at Catholic Charity Services? I'm going to go sell frogs and frog stuff online and not be a counselor now that I'm, graduately trained to do this. And if you did, what did they say to that? I'm so curious.
I think they knew that I was doing this frog stuff on the side, and it's kind of like, hey, we have this weird guy who counsels and does frogs at night type arrangement. And so as I'm sitting in the director's office and I'm saying, hey, I'm going to take a year and do this frog thing, I think he's not doing it physically, but I think mentally he's rolling his eyes like, this young, dumb, stupid kid is throwing away his future. He's just had a baby a few months ago.
Right.
What a total idiot. I'm sure he'll be crawling back to us in 4 weeks when he's like, hey, I need to buy diapers and formula. I need a real job. I need to throw this frog stuff away. But he was I think from his standpoint, he was excited about that. And I think there was a part of him that was like, yeah, you're at the point of your life where trying something like that is probably a good idea. And, you always have this to fall back on. So it was, in my mind, it wasn't as scary as probably when I look back at it, Josh, you're crazy, especially when you consider at that point, the recession is just starting to trickle through. There's some housing junk that's doing, but it's just starting to trickle through. And I was totally naive and clueless to what that meant for running a business, what that meant for job security, was totally clueless at that point, partly because of age, but just because it just happened to be the time right before it started trickling down to everybody losing their jobs. And so right as soon as I'm starting to do Josh's Frogs full time, I've already told the Catholic Social Services that, hey, I'll talk to you guys in a year. I'm not interested in doing that right now. I want to try this frog stuff. It's the recession starts affecting us personally. So I'm buying postage one Monday for shipping out packages, and the screen pops up with this error saying your card has been declined. So I jump on the phone. I'm like, hey, there's something wrong with our card. I can't buy postage right now. And the bank says, sorry, but we decided you were too risky, and we've shut down your account. And I'm like, I pay every month. I've not missed a payment. They're like, sorry, it's due to the economic uncertainty that we have right now. Your card shut off. Yeah. Okay, figure that one out. Try to solve it. It was less than a week. My wife is buying groceries. Our personal card gets shut off. You're too risky. Never carried a balance. You're too risky. Shuts off the card. At that point, it's kind of like, hey, I had the security and this job that I could probably continue doing through the recession, and I made a decision to start this business at this time. It's getting really risky right now. It's really scary. And I think a part of me was like, hey, let's just do the safe thing. Let's go back to Catholic Social Services, beg them to give me a job now. Hopefully they're at a standing right now where this kind of snowball of a recession hasn't affected them. And really talking with, again, Julie and her being like, I think you're smart enough to figure this out. As tough as it might be right now and this crazy uncertainty of what it might be, I think you're smart enough to figure it out. And really sat down and was like, okay, we're not out of money. We're not in a place where I can't pay some of the bills that the business has. It just has to change a little bit of what we're doing. I have to be a little bit more aggressive. I have to work a little bit harder. I think we can get through this. And we were really lucky as a business that this is a little inside baseball, but there are different tiers for some of this exotic animal stuff. And at the very top of that tier are people who keep saltwater tanks. So they have these saltwater fish tanks. I mean, these guys will spend multiple thousands of dollars building these tanks.
I got a friend with a saltwater tank. They dropped some serious coin on those. Yeah.
So what I found very shortly after that was all these guys that had these big saltwater tanks, they need a little bit extra cash. They're selling off their saltwater tanks, but they still want to keep something. And so what we found was all these saltwater people would sell their tank. Maybe they'd sell it at half of what they bought it for. So they have a few $1,000s, and they were saying, hey, I can buy a tank of frogs. It's way cheaper. And then I can use the rest of this money to kind of help bridge out. And so really went after some of those people and communicating like, hey, this is way cheaper and easier than keeping these saltwater tanks. And we just continue to grow. And so through growth, we were able to survive getting all credit stripped away from our business, and was able to then, work through that that year, got to the end of that year and really realized like, okay, like I can see the trajectory of where this is going. And I said, Julie, like we have to do another like burn the ships type moment.
Yeah.
And it's not just not going back to counseling, but like, I can't do this out of our house anymore. I got to move it outside of our house. I need more space in order to turn this into what I think it can be in the future. And again, she's on board, and I moved the business at about that year mark of the year trial, I guess, decided to burn the ships and set sail and move the business out of our house and hire a bunch of employees and, really say, hey, I'm going to put more risk, more, create more problems. And I'm going to really push through and try to solve these problems as we build something that's much bigger than what I had dreamed that it could be.
Amazing. So with the time that we have, I want to ask you just.
Sorry, I'm talking so much.
I'm literally listening to you thinking I'm like enthralled. I'm riveted here. This is like an epic journey here. And I'm also looking at the time and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And so in the faith movement that I was part of for a number of years, the Vineyard Movement, our founder, John Wimber, always used to say that faith is spelled R-I-S-K. And I kept listening to you and I'm like, holy smokes, there's just all this risk that you took. Can you just kind of speak to that? Like, what have you learned about taking risks? Like,
that's a part of the story that I didn't talk a lot about. Right in this transition time where I am a youth pastor and kind of doing this side thing, my brother passed away.
Wow.
So it's at that point that that I would have said I probably wasn't much of a risk taker. I probably played it a lot safer than I would have liked at that point. But I think that moment changed all of that. I think coming to terms with like mortality and being like, I got like one life, like this experience that I'm experiencing, this is the last time I'll experience this. This is the last time I'll be at this point. And really deciding like the value of a life and what somebody could do with a life, I think changed the way that I thought about risk. That like the worst thing that can happen is failure, and like it's not anymore. Like the worst thing that could happen is that I waste all that time and I don't take these risks and I don't do what I could do. And so I think that changed at that point. That was like a pivotal moment for me, and not only my life, my entrepreneurial life, but my life in general, to say like, okay, if I only have this one life and I want to make it as valuable as I can, then like I have to take these risks. And the worst thing that happens is that some of these fail and I have to pivot. But I can't take the risk that I'm in my deathbed and I'm like, I wish I would have done this, and I wish I would have taken this risk, and I wish I would have built this, and I wish I would have tried this, and I didn't want to do that. And so that's where I think that I really changed in my mindset of being much more of what people would call a risk taker, but kind of reframing that to be like some of these what appear to be large risks really aren't. Like the worst case scenario that happens is that my job, that Josh's Frogs fails and I have to go back to counseling. That's the worst thing that's going to happen. Maybe I have to go live with my parents for a bit, but like the worst thing that could happen was for me not to take those risks and not to try those things, because I've only got one life to live.
Yeah, it's like your mindset changed about risk.
Mm-hmm. Yep, really very cool. Much so. Yep.
So how do you perceive risk now? Like when you like continue to do this, like how do you, dreaming is risking, right? Like in EOS, we always say like, the only two things you really need to do is starting the journey as far as implementing the operating system is open and honest about what it is you absolutely want, and then open and honest about what's actually really going on, right? Like where you are right now.
Yep. Yep.
And that's risky. So that, like, I always think for an entrepreneur and his or her team, the vulnerability, the risk vulnerability is both those things of dreaming and sharing your dream, and then being absolutely ruthlessly honest about where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
So risk is such an interesting ingredient for that, and your mindset shift. So fast forward us through these risk years until like where we meet in the journey. So you're just taking all of these risks again and again and again. You move out, you start hiring people, and so that's about almost 10 years of a run of growing the company. Is that fair to say? Like you move out and you start growing, and then our lives start to intersect. You're about 10 years into the journey.
Yep. So,
and your wife kept doing it. Was it like every year you'd ask her, "Can I keep doing this for another year?" Or
no, but there were times where I went to her, and like I think part of growing a business, you get to the point where like you're taking the risk, and you feel like, okay, I can do this. The worst thing that could happen is that my life is a disaster or crumbles at this point. Right. And you start building something larger, and you start involving other people, and now you need to balance the like, hey, I want to take a lot of risks because I don't want to waste my life, but like I have payroll that I've got to make, and I have other people that are invested in this vision for the future, and trying to balance that to say like, okay, we're going to take risks because of the vision that we have for the future is so big, but we want to do it in a way that's safe and that people are on the same page with understanding the risks that we're taking. And so I think like it shifts from more risky that the business is doing and more casting a vision to get people excited around a risk-filled future that they feel like, oh my gosh, my back is against the wall now too. Like I've really got to be a part of this to move this forward. And so I think at this point, like when you're doing it all by yourself and you're taking those risks, there's a certain level of risk that you can take. And as you move forward and you start building a team, the risks that I could take are probably less as an individual. But when I add in all the risks that my team is willing to take, it is a much larger risk. And when I look at our future plans and our future dreams for what we have, like it's really risky and it's going to take a lot of risk to get there. But I feel like personally, I'm invested less risk, but I collectively as a team, we've invested a lot more risk into that, and really feel emboldened to be able to say, like, we're setting goals where failure is probably a much higher % chance of happening than I think most people would be excited about. But like, because we only have this one chance, one life, one season of time for Josh's Frogs to accomplish that, like I feel like it excites people and it energizes people around doing something that involves a little bit of risk for them and a little bit of risk for us or a lot of risk for us as a company. And so I think people would see me as very risky. I think our staff would be like, yeah, Josh is willing and interested in pushing the envelope. And so there's a lot of play that goes along in that, like, hey, you know, let's be safe and let's be smart at the same time we're being risky.
Yeah, so we know where you're at today, $15 million company with 110 people. We know where you started, which was not only did you not have a line of credit. A lot of people are like, I don't know, I'll start this business. I got this little bit of credit. You started it with no credit. They took the credit away from you. So where you started was really wild. Yeah. And a lot of people might be settled with a $15 million business, 110 people, but you're not. So with the time that we have, I want to do kind of a couple of things. One, first, just take us to where you ultimately want to go. We call that a 10-year target, the long road of obedience in the same direction, kind of Eugene Peterson there, the march that we're on. And then just like, I want to land where you're at today and what you're learning like right now, because as far as your EOS journey with me, you're in the early stages of that. Yeah. So let's go to the future though, really quick, and let's, as if that if your early days weren't inspiring enough and where you're at aren't inspiring enough, take us what we call in the U.S. the Vision Traction Organizer, the 10-year vision, the target that not like if we hit it, like we actually are saying we're going to hit this, and we're focused on doing this.
Yep.
What are you going to look like, and what's the target you're trying to hit in 10 years?
So right now we're at 15 million. Our what we're working towards right now is a 10-year plan that would be 700 million. Would be between 4,000 and 5,000.
It's a little bigger than 15 million.
Yeah. Between 4,000 and 5,000 employees. What that means for us as a company is that when we look at our total industry spending on a yearly basis, that's only about 20% of our industry's spending. So we're looking to take 1/5 of what our industry does in any given year based on what it is now. But our goal is that as a business, we help grow that industry to the point that 1/5 no longer becomes 1/5 of it, and it gives us a longer runway here in the future. And so I think like when we talked about risk, like that 700 million and 4,000 to 5,000 employees doesn't seem very risky to us just because of the total size of the industry and the growth that we've had in the past, and how excited and how quickly we're able to come up with like the roadmap for like what does that look like to get us there to that 700 million. So I feel like it's pretty ambitious for any company to set those, but I really feel like for us and the trajectory that we're on, like I feel like okay, it's gonna involve a lot of rolling up our sleeves and a lot of working really, really hard, and there's gonna be a lot of obstacles that are gonna come in our way, but really feel like the 700 million is something that is attainable. And it is something that like I've even over the past year been communicating that to people like outside of our company to be like, hey, here's where we're headed. We're looking for partners to help us get there, and been able to use it as a communication tool with the idea that I think that we have a really good chance of hitting it. But I want to be totally honest that I'm not interested in setting 10-year plans where there isn't a little bit of risk that we're not going to make it, because I don't want to waste any time. I don't want to waste the next 10 years and easily coast to 700 million. Like I think if we pull out all the stops and really roll up our sleeves, I think we can get there. But it's not going to be a cakewalk.
We always talk about making a difference in the world. That's a dent in the universe.
Oh yeah.
That's a big difference. So that's spooky, that's risky, that takes some belief and some faith. And what I love about your leadership team is I'm in the room with you guys in the early vision building day one where we go over this, and you lay this out, and I'm like over hanging on the side of a kitchen island in the session room, like what? And your team's just like, yeah, that's it. Yeah, and I'm thinking, you guys are crazy. I love it.
I've been really blessed.
There's a journey, right? Like, I mean, today, like when we go to the session room every quarter, I always say, well, you got a great vision. You know what you want. That's wonderful. And now today, at the end of our 90-day run, you're just a team with a bunch of issues. Right. So we got to close the gap between that. So you're in the early stages of EOS with me and your team, and we've done a lot of really good work so far. Drive us down to your world kind of right now. Like, what are your big focuses? What are you learning? What's your life been like for the last, I don't know, what have you been doing stuff for about the last 90, 120 days, something like that? What's been impactful for you? What kind of cool changes have happened for you in your life, and how your involvement in the company looks now?
I think one of the hard parts about growing from 0 to 15 million and 1 employee, me, to 110 employee is that it's hard to make systematic structural changes in that growth because everybody is working with, including myself, is working with the way we did it last week. And so it's hard for me to say, all right, starting Monday, it's totally different. Like we're just falling back into the ways that it always has been. So we rolled out 2 years ago, said, hey, we need to have multiple locations outside of Michigan in our future. So we need to start building leadership that doesn't need Josh involved, that doesn't need certain other key people involved. We got to split up this leadership. And so ended up promoting somebody to a COO role. And over the last 2 years, I've tried to make that transition from me running the day-to-day to her running the day-to-day, and for people to see that change. And we had some success with that, but it was really hard to like reorient the structure of our the way in which we act in just a decision announcement type arena. And so we struggled with that. And then we decided, okay, let's do something that's like a bigger splash to kind of force some of the structural change. And so we started with EOS. It was a perfect fit for us in not only like communicating that to people, but also for them to see like, oh gosh, things are really going to change. And so I think one of the coolest things that's happened over this 3 to 4 months is people accepting roles and responsibilities that I think we've been trying to hand them for a long time. But like this was the structure that we needed to like be like, you're in charge of this. This is what your future looks like. And really get them to grasp that, but also for the rest of the team to really grasp that, like, okay, things are changing. And I think I said it, one of the greatest things have been in the last 3 months is we handed out lots of promotions. And there were promotions that we were trying to hand out for a long time. And this was the structure we needed so that people like really got a promotion. So I kept seeing like all these employees post on Facebook, like, I have this new promotion at work. I have these new responsibilities. And everyone's like, wow, that's great. And I'm thinking, we've been trying to do that for like 2 or 3 years to get like, that's the role we're trying to be doing, but just didn't have the structure behind, like really empowering them to take that on, and for the structure to be able to communicate that to everybody else that, hey, you know, this person right here has been granted this authority based on who they are, the work they've done in the past, and what we see for their future. And so that's been the coolest part is handing down promotions. We've done a lot of promotions in the last 90 days, and that really gets me excited because these people, once they really catch their role in this bigger vision, like I really feel like nothing can stop us.
That's so neat. To think that people, you wanted to give them the authority and take the responsibility, but you just didn't know how.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And so what Josh is talking about, just to kind of to put some context to that, that's the accountability chart. And that's really simple. We just take a big step back and we go, well, let's put the company first. Let's look 6 to 12 months into the future, and let's just decide what should the structure look like, not with where we've been in the past, and not even candidly with the people that we have, although you have great people. It's not about that. Sometimes people don't have great people. That's a different issue. But in either way, they're both solved because we just build the structure that we need. And then we go and we just start going interviewing people, both in the company and outside the company, and go, hey, do you get what this seat requires? It's just a seat with 5 roles. Here's who you're accountable to, and here's who's accountable to you. Do you get it? And if you do, cool, that's the first step. And well, can you do it? Yeah, I think I can. Okay, cool. We might have to do some training and do that. And then, well, do you want it? And that's it's almost like the handoff. Like, hey, do you want this? Yeah. Because I don't want it. I don't want it. And we want to make sure people want, and can do their jobs. And then you can let go, and then they can take that responsibility. I love that you were saying that people were online saying that they were promoted. That's just so fun. That's so cool. Yeah. And really, you let go of some stuff too. Like, can you explain that? And for I'm going to just set a little bit of context. And can we do 10 more minutes? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Let's do 10 more minutes, because I want to land on this. Catchin Vision is for anybody that's interested in the EOS, just to understand the inside of what happens, and then just to tell people stories. And Josh is telling an amazing story. But real quick, just when we talk about the accountability chart and promoting people and delegating things to elevate others up, you were mentioning a COO, and I want to talk about her. But to set the standard, just for everybody so that they can hear this, if you're an entrepreneur who has a lot of ideas, loves the relationship component and building that, loves to do the big sales, you don't want to run a CRM or or anything like that, but you love selling the company, being the face of the company. You love just to research stuff and really have a pulse on the industry, and you love your people. You're probably a visionary, and then if you're like most people, like Josh, like myself, you find yourself running things day to day and leading and having to manage and hold people accountable day to day, and trying to execute your business plan and making sure all your wild ideas actually have a profit loss mindset so you don't bankrupt the company, like so many of us would do, and almost have done. And we're just trying to remove obstacles and barriers for people, and then just trying to execute these ideas you have. And if you're normal, those all feel like one job. And one of my favorite things about EOS is that we say, actually, those are two different distinct leadership jobs. One's called visionary and one's called integrator. And the visionary is the charge and the spark, and we release you to go just do that. And then you can let go of the stuff that the integrator does. That's just, if you're open and honest, you're like, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, that's scary and risky too, to let go of control. Talk to us about that now that I've set some context for those listening.
I think, like, for when we talk about taking risks, and I'm going to try to keep this short.
You're fine. You're good.
I think when it comes to taking risk, I think when you take risks, you take on responsibility. And so there's this sense of like duty that, like, okay, if I'm going to push us forward and cast this risky vision, then I have the responsibility for making sure that we get there. And so I think I got really stuck in that mindset of like, okay, I have to perform the visionary integrator role because the visionary role dictates that the vision is going to be really hard. And so I think I got stuck in that. The other mistake that I made too was that, like, I tried to transition Amanda, who's been a very integral part of our business, has been super important in the ways in which we've grown over the years. But I think I set her up to be like, okay, I'm this unhealthy integrator where I have my fingers in a lot of different stuff. We've really grown. We're at 50 to 60 people. I'm still doing a lot of, got my fingers in a lot of stuff that I probably should not have my fingers in. And I tried to give that role to Amanda and say, like, hey, you take over the integrator part that I wasn't doing very well and do it the way that I was doing it, which is not very well. And I think I set her up for a scenario where, like, I'm casting unhealthy management onto her plate. And so I think the one thing that EOS did was not only clarifying her role and saying, like, okay, like let's pull the Band-Aid off and let's separate Josh and Amanda and give them their specific roles. But I think taking the next level below that and being like, okay, Josh is no longer involved in that, and no one should be involved in some of those roles. Those roles need to be given to people that are in that leadership team to be able to have responsibility and accountability for that kind of stuff. And we were doing a really good job of sharing accountability, and that, like, no one felt responsible because everybody was accountable for stuff, and really pushing that down. And I think that's been the huge success. Like, I think where I was in my mind was like, okay, I don't know how we could have an integrator because integrator at Josh's Frogs is ridiculously complex and there's so many moving parts and that person has to be involved in that. And then I think EOS, when we wrapped our minds around that and really got on the same page with that, like, no, the integrator's job is to bring cohesion and teamwork among this team, not to take the entire leadership's responsibilities and roles and shove them on one person. And so I think, I think that's been really, really good for us moving forward. And I think that's allowed not only Amanda to be really successful in her role, but for us to be really successful and really excited about how ambitious we can set some of our plans for even the next year and next 3 years.
So you're out of day-to-day in the work business. you're not managing people anymore.
Correct.
You're the leader of the company. You're responsible for spending the majority, 80 to 100% of your time leading and not managing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk to us about that. What's that like? What's that feel like?
So you take something that you were doing for 15 years and you say, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Right.
All turning 40 years old, like I think creates this midlife crisis of like, not only who am I, but what the heck am I going to do here in the future? Like, am I just removing myself one layer away from everybody, but I still need to somehow, like through backdoor channels, figure out how to like massage things and move them on? Like, do I just keep the same roles and responsibilities? I just remove myself further away, so now I'm doing it with a stick instead of getting my hands in it. So I think I wrestled with that, but like I also too was able to step back from the day-to-day stuff and say, you know, take some what you like to say clarity breaks around. Okay, 700 million. Like there's a lot of big picture stuff that's a part of 700 million. And if I'm involved in what's happening, not only in the day-to-day, but like what's happening in the next month and trying to wrap my mind around that, like there's 10 years is going to sneak up on us and we will have grown because we're going to continue to grow because we have great people and great products and great processes. We're going to continue to grow, but we won't be at 700 million if that way of being continues. And so I began, and this is the hard part about this, is that beginning this is not a full-time job. Like, so the whole idea of like transitioning my mind to think 10 years out, like when I think of like, what does that mean for next week? I'm like, well, it doesn't mean a lot of stuff. Like there's not a lot I can do next week to help us in 10. And then I found out that the next week involved a lot more stuff. And then the next week involved a lot more stuff. And then it got to the point where like, even I would say about 3 weeks ago, where I was like, oh my gosh, I need help with doing the 10-year stuff because it's more than one person can do in 1 week, just focusing on what's going to happen in 10 years. Like I need help with doing that kind of stuff. So I think it was really cool that it kind of was hitting me around this midlife crisis, but really exciting on the flip side that like I needed to trust what you were saying and what EOS is saying and what I'm reading in Rocket Fuel and what I'm reading in Traction, that like that work is not only holds value, but still involves the things that I love about entrepreneurship and taking some risks and developing some big relationships, thinking really, really big. I think sometimes you forget that like when you're doing this week and next week type work, it's not very big. It's exciting and there's short-term rewards and all that stuff to stroke my ego. But like really, like if I look back, when I'm 50 or 60 and I've been spending in the 1 to 2 week zone, I think I'm going to be really dissatisfied with what we could have done in the future and feel like I really wasted my time making sure that the train was on the tracks when I could have been focusing on the destination that we're heading and getting us all aligned around that. So I think I did it in 10 minutes.
Yeah, so it's it is this massive just mind shift, not just to find an integrator. I know that it's what I find is the idea of not running things day to day and not having to be there day to day and not having to manage people. When I'm talking to visionaries, and I was talking to you, I remember when our first call we did on Zoom, and you were like, I could just see you stepping up and kind of leaning in, like that's like for real, like I don't have to do that. And then there's like this immediate kind of fear of like, well, wait a minute, then like I really better trust this person. Like you're telling me to let go of all the control, and I was the one that took responsibility to even make this thing happen.
Yep.
And I needed to take responsibility to make sure when I brought other people on that this happened. And now, there's a price to doing what I want to do.
Yeah.
There's to say yes to finding an integrator also means saying no in this kind of weird way. I feel like I'm letting go of control, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. You are letting go of control.
Yeah.
So for those of just listening, as we kind of close this out, and I don't know if we can do this in any short time or not, but let's just try to. Can you speak to there must be just a radical trust between you and your integrator.
Mm-hmm. Yep, very much so. I think I'm going to go with the longest. So I think like part of my dealing with risk was realizing I can take a real risk and then I can just work really, really hard to accomplish it. Like that's
Right.
how I can do it.
Yep.
And I think this is a different kind of risk where the risk is not counterbalanced with I can just work really hard. The risk is counterbalanced with I trust you. And I trust you is way more risky than like I can just burn the midnight oil. I can work 20 hours. I can work through this risk that we're about to take. And like Amanda and I've talked to a few other people that are just starting on EOS who don't have an integrator, and I'm like, I can't help you. Like Amanda and I have known each other for almost 15 years. Like I totally trust her. I totally am. Over those 15 years, I've gotten to the point where I can see like, okay, she's definitely better in a lot of things than I am. And yeah. I really trust not only how good she is right now, but I also trust her because right now she is wrestling with where she needs to be in the next 10 years. And she's actively trying to get better at that. She's asking for feedback, not only from me, but from everybody around her. She's reading, she's sending me these big, long, she calls them brain dumps, but like just huge emails where she's thinking through all this stuff. And she's like, thanks for letting me just talk through all this stuff in a big, long email. So she's wrestling with those things. And I think that allows me to say, okay, I'm taking a huge risk and I'm counterbalancing that with trust. And I'm in a unique position where I have somebody that I really feel like is totally capable of doing it way better than what I could have done it. And with the structure of the people underneath her that are really good people as well. Like I think it helps in that trust, but it still like gives me that, I guess that buzz or that rush of being in a situation where we are taking some risks. But it's a different type of risk in that I can't just work 20 hours to fix it. Like I just have to counterbalance that with trust. And so it's a really good relationship. We don't always see eye to eye, but we have the kind of relationship where I can say, hey, that's kind of weird. And she can say to me, Josh, you're dumb. Like you're like, you're in fantasy land right now. Like that's just not possible to do that. And I'll share one situation we had earlier where I was just like, I just want to go home from work and spend all night working on this project and release it in the morning. And she just writes back, please don't. Please don't do that. And then be able to like sit down with her and for her to lay out like, okay, here's how we do it right. Not releasing this in a night. Like here's how we build it out. And for me to be able to see like, oh my gosh, that's way better than the way I would have done it. Sorry that I got shoved in my mind to integrator role. Like let me just do the visionary during the day and integrator during the night and push through this. So I think it's a different type of risk, but it still gives me that still like where I think like part of my lostness around being the visionary was that it feels very, very, I don't know if you want to use the word easy, but just to paint this big, huge vision and hope people get to it. And I've really found that like, it really allows me to get the same drive that I had the first 15 years where I'm setting ambitious plans and working with teams around catching that vision and not having to worry about them necessarily, how that works out throughout the company and allowing people to work in their zone and then the ways in which they've been gifted.
Yeah, I think we find that when you find that integrator, and my belief is that every entrepreneur visionary, the number one thing they can pursue outside of their vision is to find that trusted integrator, somebody that you trust, that can take your energy, that can take your charge and control it. and in quote unquote integrate it. Integrators actually are the ones that set the pace of the company, that take all your issues. You don't have to hang on to your issues anymore. Your integrator takes all your issues. With that being said, is though your integrator also can tell you no, just like you were talking about. Like, I got this thing. I'll just work. I'll just do it. I'll just work, and then it'll be done. And then the integrator's like, yeah, no. And you trust that integrator to like tell you, yeah, I know I love you, but no, that's not your job anymore. And you're not even good at that. Like, don't do that. Like, your idea about it is brilliant. That's what we need you for, is the idea, because we didn't have that idea.
Yep.
That's your job, is to come up with the idea, and then tell us what vision looks like for that idea, so we know what you want to see. But then we'll go do it.
Yeah.
We'll go do it. You don't have to do it anymore. You don't have to think, how am I going to do that?
Yep.
You don't have to think that anymore. You got this person that can do it, that can lead it and actually integrate it across all the major functions.
Yep.
It's such a really unique relationship. And I always explaining this to visionaries that I talk to, they want the sausage at the end, but the process, a lot of them are scared to go through the process. And I always just say, well, you took courage and went through the process so far. What if we could just do that in a less difficult way? Not easier, and it's hard, but how about less complex and less that? And I find this, and maybe you can speak to this, and then we can land the plane for everybody here, is that this experience is, you actually have to do it. Like, the idea of an integrator, okay, cool. Maybe you don't get it. Maybe you want it, but you're like, I don't know how to do it. And with EOS, we just get in the room and then we go, okay, we've talked about it. You said you want it. Now it's time to do it. And I find that this letting go is something that really is more caught by experience than it is taught.
Yeah. And
I can just tell you, Josh, you're catching it. You're catching how this works. Why don't you leave us with this? Like, if anybody was just listening here, and I think you have a passion for visionaries like I do, and you're seeing how this is helping change your life and make your life better by having an integrator, having an operating system, making the risk not less risky, but more calculated with the EOS. Like, what would you want to say to anybody listening to this about where you're at, what you're learning, or maybe just somebody kind of considering taking a step towards the EOS? How would you close this out? What would you want to say to somebody? Maybe what would you say to yourself?
Yep.
8 months ago or something.
Yep. No, it would go back to 2 years ago when I decided, like, hey, I need somebody else running the day-to-day in order to get us to the point where we can spread out. And what I did is, in my mind, that made sense. I need somebody. But in my actions, what it was really saying was, hey, I don't trust you. I still want to, in some ways, backhandedly help you by being involved in the day-to-day. And so what I was doing was saying to somebody, here, I want you to have this role, but my actions were communicating, I don't want you to have this role. I want to continue to make sure that you're successful by having my hands in everything and not allow you to take that role. And so I spent 2 years doing that. And it finally got to the point where, like, as we just exploded and continued to grow, and we started getting closer to 100 employees, where it just was not sustainable anymore. And it became like, okay, I definitely, like, I thought I couldn't do it before. I know that I definitely can't do it. And I think it was really the ripping off the Band-Aid, getting in a room with you and our leadership team and saying, like, okay, I've said 2 years ago, I want to give you this role. Like, today, I'm going to give you this role. Like, I'm done. Like, I'm going to step back. And it created this, I would say, at least a couple of months of, like, oh my gosh, like, this is not going to work. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if they can be successful without me, to getting to the point that, like, I focus so much of my energy and time and looking at that, what that 10 years looks like, and trying to work towards that 10-year and develop those relationships with the people that we're going to need to have relationships with to get us to that point, that I almost got distracted by the long-term plan and stopped thinking about the day-to-day stuff. And as I not only stopped meddling in it, but even stopped thinking about the day-to-day stuff, that's where I think Amanda finally had the freedom to take on that role, and our leadership had finally the freedom to take on those roles. And I found that, like, probably more than letting go was me just getting distracted by the tenure and focusing my energy on that. And I think that communicated to them when I did that and I stopped meddling, that very, very quickly they realized, like, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, no one's going to do that, and allow them to step into their roles where in the past I had communicated one thing and done another thing. Now I was communicating something and doing it as well too. That I think it's just bizarre how I could spend almost 2 years communicating something, living my life the opposite way, and no one's accepting that, and me being frustrated with that to the point where, okay, I just need to take this dive and actually just live it out. Like, say, this is what I want, and then tomorrow live that life out. Like, made it so much easier. It's just so bizarre how you can say something and feel like, oh, I'm not communicating very well, when your actions are just totally communicating the opposite thing. Like, I want you guys to take more accountability, but I'm going to step in and take some of the accountability too. Like, how quickly that creates the message of, no, what I'm saying is not true. Like, the way I'm living my life is totally in contrast to that. And so I think just me being able to step out and really communicate with my actions has been much more received than the ways I try to communicate it with my words.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you're like, I've read EOS, I've read Traction, or I was curious, and you're listening to Josh, or maybe you've been saying this, maybe you read this stuff and you're like trying to talk to your team about it, but it actually hasn't happened, and your experience is like Josh's. Just know that that's what we're here for. That's what we're here for as implementers, is to help you actually do what you actually say you want to do, and to help make that happen. It's a great story, Josh. I'm curious, for those that maybe want to come work for you, they're like, all right, I'm in, and just plug for Josh. They have people that will pack up and leave and come across the country to come work for this company in Owosso. And shameless plug to my hometown of Owosso. It's a pretty good place to live.
It is.
Yeah, it's a great little community there between Lansing and Flint. And then I'm sure there's some people that just want to know you and talk to you. Yeah. Maybe there's somebody that's like, I got an idea, I want to talk to you, or man, your story really hit me. Can we just talk? Maybe somebody's struggling out there, and maybe you're the courage that can help them make the breakthrough that they were looking to have. So Josh, how can people get a hold of you if they want to talk to you?
Yeah, so they can email me. My email is really easy, josh@joshsfrogs.com. Or I'm active on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook. Just connect with me there. I'm one of the few Joshua Willards, but look for the Joshua Willard in Owosso, Michigan, and you'll find me.
Thank you. That's great. Josh, the time flew by. Wow, we went over our time significantly, but it was great. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on with me and telling the story. It was really, really good. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you for having me, Ryan. And then I'm just thankful for the ways in which you've impacted my life and our company's life, and really excited about what the future holds for both of us.
Of course, me too, brother. All right, folks. Catch you next time on Catchin' Vision. See you later.
Take care.
Have a great day.